In this video, I'm going to show you 4 of the best value countries in Europe and 3 of the most expensive places that are still worth every penny. And one of those expensive countries is still my favorite place I've ever visited after visiting over 100 countries. I'm Roger from priceoftravel.com, and let's get into it. First up is Portugal, which used to feel like a hidden gem but has become much more popular in recent years, and even so, it's still one of the best values in Western Europe. Lisbon feels like a city that should be expensive, with classic architecture, great hotels, and plenty of worthwhile sights, including hilltop viewpoints and historic castles. But prices are still surprisingly reasonable. For example, you can still find solid 3-star hotels here for around $110 a night even in summer, which is hard to beat for a capital city like this. It feels a lot like Spain in terms of culture and atmosphere, but your money generally goes further, especially compared to places like Barcelona, where similar hotels can cost quite a bit more. Porto is the other main stop, just a few hours away by train. It's smaller, a bit more relaxed, and usually even cheaper, with a beautiful riverside setting and of course access to the port wine cellars across the river. And if you're traveling in the warmer months, the Algarve in the south has some of the nicest beaches in Europe, often at much more reasonable prices than you'd expect from a major summer destination. So overall, Portugal is one of those places where you feel like you're getting a full Western Europe experience without paying Western Europe prices. Next up is Hungary, and Budapest is the main reason to come. It's a gorgeous historic city that feels far more important and far more expensive than it actually is. You've got grand architecture, a castle overlooking the Danube, and one of the most impressive parliament buildings in Europe, all in a city where prices are still very reasonable. You can stay in a highly rated 3-star hotel in a great central location for around $100 per night, and in a city like Paris, that same kind of place would easily be over $300. The food is another highlight. Hungarian cuisine is rich and a bit heavy, but it's also very affordable if you follow the locals instead of the tourist spots. It's one of those places where you can sit down for a full meal and still feel like you got a great deal. And one of the most unique things about Budapest is the thermal bath culture. You can spend a full day at one of the famous spas for under $30, which is something you just won't find in most other European capitals. If you have more time, areas around Lake Balaton are a popular getaway for locals and are even cheaper, giving you a chance to see a different side of Hungary without spending much at all. By the way, if this is helpful so far, I'd really appreciate a quick like. It helps other people find these videos. Next up is Poland, which actually feels quite different from Hungary, even though they're in the same part of Europe. Warsaw is the largest city and current capital, but I'd usually skip it in favor of Krakow. It's still a good-sized city, but as the former capital, it has a much more interesting historic core and is easier to fit into a typical Europe itinerary. The old town in Krakow is absolutely gorgeous, with a large main square, historic buildings, and a castle overlooking the river, and it all feels like classic Europe at a much lower price point. You can still find well-located 3-star hotels here for under $100 a night, so it's a place where you can splurge a bit and still stay on budget. Krakow also has a lively and very affordable nightlife scene, especially around the Jewish quarter, which is just a short walk from the main square. And if you've got more time, cities like Wrocław are just as charming and often even cheaper. You could even try Łódź if you want something a bit different and another name that definitely doesn't sound the way it looks. The last of our best value countries before we get into the expensive ones is Turkey. Istanbul, which famously straddles Europe and Asia, should be your first stop, but definitely not your only one. Turkey has had some economic ups and downs over the years, and the result right now is that it's much cheaper than it probably should be. You can still find nice hotels in the tourist center of Istanbul for around $60 a night even in high season, and the food is also surprisingly affordable, although alcohol tends to be a bit more expensive. The sights and history here are world-class. It feels a bit like Rome in terms of importance and atmosphere, but often at less than half the price. It might not always be this affordable, but for now it's one of the best deals you'll find anywhere in Europe. Beyond Istanbul, Cappadocia is the other must-see, with its fairy chimneys and almost cartoon-like landscapes that you won't find anywhere else. It's so unusual and memorable that it would be worth visiting even if it weren't so cheap, but it is. And if you're traveling in the warmer months, places like Kaş on the Mediterranean coast offer a completely different experience. Laid back, scenic, and still very affordable. I actually lived there for over a year, and it's still one of those places that is easy to fall in love with. But here's the other side of it. Some of the most expensive countries in Europe are also the most unforgettable. Next up is Switzerland, which isn't just expensive, it's the most expensive country in Europe. So if you're trying to get good value on your trip, this is one where it really pays to plan carefully. I touched on this in my recent video about cities to skip, and I'll link that below, but the short version is that larger cities here can feel a bit underwhelming for the price. Where Switzerland really stands out is the alpine scenery, which is some of the most beautiful you'll find anywhere in the world. The best place to experience that is around Interlaken, especially in the Lauterbrunnen Valley. The scenery is so dramatic that it almost doesn't look real, with steep cliffs, waterfalls, and small villages that feel like they're straight out of a postcard. Gimmelwald is my favorite for a quieter stay, but Mürren and Lauterbrunnen itself have more hotel options. You really don't need a long visit, even 3 days here is enough to feel like you've seen something special. And if you've got a bit more time, Lucerne is another great stop. It's a small, incredibly scenic city set on a lake with easy access to nearby mountains. So while Switzerland is definitely a splurge, focusing on these areas makes it much more worth the cost. Next up is Norway, which I also mentioned in that recent video. The key to getting the most out of your time here is to skip Oslo and head straight to Bergen, which is the gateway to the famous fjords along the western coast. Bergen itself is a gorgeous and charming city with a busy harbor, but the real highlight is getting out into the fjords. You'll want to take at least one boat trip to see the scenery up close, whether that's a half-day tour, a full-day trip, or something longer. The landscapes here are completely different from Switzerland. Instead of alpine villages, you've got massive cliffs dropping straight into deep blue water, and it feels much more remote and dramatic. I actually spent a few days on the Hurtigruten line, which is part cruise ship and part mail delivery route for small coastal towns. It's a really unique way to see the coastline, stopping briefly in one scenic location after another. Hotels in Bergen aren't quite as expensive as Switzerland, but they're still not cheap. So if you're going to spend the money, this is another place where it can make sense to focus on the experience, even if that means spending a night or two out on the water. And finally, Iceland, which is still my answer when people ask about my favorite place I've visited after traveling to more than 100 countries. Iceland isn't close to anything else, so this isn't a place you just add on to another trip. Planning ahead is important if you want to get good value here. In my opinion, Reykjavik itself is a bit underwhelming and not worth visiting on its own, so I'd spend a night or two there and then get out on the road. Renting a car is the best option because that's how you get to what is probably some of the most interesting sightseeing you'll ever see. If you only have 4 or 5 days, focus on the southern coast, where many of the most dramatic sites are located. But if you can manage a full week or more, I'd highly recommend doing the entire Ring Road, which circles the island. Iceland is a volcanic island that's been active fairly recently, and the result is scenery that really doesn't look like anywhere else on Earth. Waterfalls, black sand beaches, lava fields, it's all completely different. You can still find basic hotels and guest houses in small towns along the way, but booking ahead is important because Iceland keeps getting more popular. And once you're there, it's easy to see why. It's expensive, but this is one of those places where it really does feel worth every penny. So the key to traveling in Europe isn't avoiding expensive places, it's knowing when they're worth it and balancing them with countries where your money goes a lot further. I've got a full article with more details and updated prices linked below on priceoftravel.com, and I'll also link my recent video on European cities to skip, which goes into more detail on a few of these. And if you found this helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I've got a lot more Europe guides coming up soon.